There's been a lot of activity in Canada recently around domestic food production as well as US trade relations. Today, we're talking to Richard Lee, Executive Director of the Ontario Greenhouse Vegetable Growers Association, to get some perspective on this as it relates to the CEA sector. How would you describe the current state of Ontario's greenhouse vegetable sector?
Yeah, so I would say a lot of uncertainty, a lot of apprehension when it comes to some of the investments and future investments that our members are looking to explore. But overall, we need to remain cautiously optimistic that some type of positive outcome to ensure all our members are, have that sustainable option to continue to support North American food security. I think the biggest issue right now is the trade and trade access. That's
Yeah.
creating this uncertainty, apprehension. It's We've seen a little bit of relief based on the Supreme Court's decision, and then today I think there is another article released indicating that they are directing the U.S. government to refund those tariffs. So we're not out of the woods yet, but
Hmm.
we need to maintain that trade access. Maintaining consistent access to the U.S. market is our number one priority. We export 85% of our produce to the United States, so as you can appreciate, the impacts of access are paramount. If that border closed, we would have some significant losses here in Canada.
So, from the federal level, Canada has recently introduced several initiatives that are aimed at strengthening domestic food production and affordability. Can you tell me a little bit about those and which ones stand to be most beneficial to greenhouse growers?
Yeah, so you're referring to Prime Minister Carney's announcement on lowering food costs and food production by expensing greenhouses, buildings to support increased domestic food production. So ultimately, I think we released a press release on this, applauding the federal government, recognizing that greenhouse agriculture is part of the solution for some of these lower costs and domestic food production. But realistically, it lacks any detail. So we encourage the government to engage in consultations. They had indicated that they have, but we don't know who they spoke to. And realistically, the ones that have made the commitment to invest in greenhouse structures will be the beneficiaries of this announcement, right? So they're accelerating the depreciation of that asset front end, going back to November of last year up till 2030. They have to be operational. So great initiative. It's excellent that the government is recognizing the need for a greenhouse. The problem is just based on that little bit of information, it's almost like we're opening up the doors for greater competition when we've already established that we produce so much that Canadians would not be able to consume the produce we grow in a year. So domestic food security is supported by current greenhouse establishments. We really need that trade access and programs to support the sustainability of greenhouse growing in Canada.
Okay. I did see that you just won an advertising award for a campaign promoting Ontario greenhouse produce in Tennessee. So, congratulations on that. Can you tell me a little bit about initiatives like that and how that fits into all of this?
Yeah, so Kristen, I mean, we looked at some different opportunities as it relates to marketing on a generic standpoint to represent our members as a whole. And when you look at a map, everything east of the Mississippi, we already have a significant stronghold in by supplying tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers. And that can access approximately 58% of the US population. And our selling point, or what we've been utilizing to promote the freshness and nutritious value of our produce, is we can get it to the consumer within 1 day's drive. So Ontario is ideally situated with 3 key border crossings that able to access the US population within that 1 day's drive. There's still areas in the United States moving west that could ideally benefit from greenhouse production. So with that, our marketing team identified based on demographics, potential lift in consumer consumption, and identified the state of Tennessee to explore, but also generically promote Ontario grown greenhouse produce. A lot of people are unaware of greenhouse produce. We did a pretty aggressive campaign, and we focused a lot on digital and social media to attract the demographics that we had identified. And we showed some significant lift. Efforts go back to our marketing team, as well as our marketing committee, which is comprised of our members, and ultimately have spearheaded a great campaign that is now being expanded into Missouri.
From your vantage point, what's at stake for U.S. retailers and food service operators if cross-border greenhouse trade becomes less and less predictable?
Yeah. So you think about over the decades, Canada and US has built a pretty deeply interconnected and mutually beneficial agricultural relationship. It's pretty symbiotic. We rely on the US on a lot of goods, food security, competitiveness, year-round production, and they do as well. We cannot produce domestically some of the products that they do in any type of volume. So we have some farms trialing pineapples, mangoes, blueberries. One actually tried to grow a banana, and I think the banana was about 4 inches long. So listen, they're investing in diversification of crops to be able to mitigate some of our risks. But I think that relationship is symbiotic. And if it was ultimately disrupted, I think the consequences would be felt immediately on both sides, particularly with retailers and food service. You know, you'll have US buyers having to seek alternate, less predictable suppliers for greenhouse vegetables. And that really depends on what trade embargoes are enacted too, right? Mm-hmm. In parallel, Canadian retailers and food service operators would also have to face product shortages that come from the US. It's kind of funny because when you look at the rhetoric of the US government, it's primarily focused at nearshoring, right? Supporting domestic production. So when you think about replacing the scale and technical expertise of Ontario greenhouse in the US, it would take decades. And you would need the infrastructure, the acreage, and the toughest part is the skilled workforce, whether that be in the US or here in Canada. So that recent announcement with Prime Minister Carney also needs to support the resources we need to grow the vegetables. So ultimately, I think it will impact everyone on both sides of the border. And I don't think there'll be anything positive coming out of it other than, and it's not a positive, but increased food pricing. And hate to say it, greenhouse vegetables, we're in a G7 country. Vegetables are a luxury item. And when people are looking at tightening up their household budget, they're going to eliminate those luxury items and they're going to look for alternatives like the processed foods and frozen vegetables, processed vegetables, as opposed to that fresh, nutritious option.